Late at night, the beaches of Goa are usually a place of comfort. The ocean wind is warm, the waves crash softly against the sand, and groups of friends gather around bonfires to trade stories in the dark. Among one of these groups sat 19-year-old Samarth. He dismissed every local ghost story he heard as fiction, finding the idea of spirits and cursed ground laughable. But that night, the conversation shifted. A friend challenged him directly. If he was so fearless, he needed to drive alone to the most notoriously haunted location in the state and take a photograph inside. Samarth accepted the challenge with a confident laugh. He believed he was simply calling his friend's bluff, and he rode off toward the mansion to prove there was nothing to fear. The target of his dare was the Demelo House. Decades ago, it belonged to two wealthy brothers who shared the sprawling property. Over the years, bitter disagreements between the siblings soured into intense hatred. One night, that hostility finally boiled over into a physical fight, ending only when one brother drove a knife into the other. The killer buried his brother's body deep in the dirt beneath a massive tree in the backyard. But he wouldn't outlive his secret. Just months later, the surviving brother was found dead on the property under entirely unexplained circumstances. Locals who passed by the property claim the violence of that final night never actually ceased. The brothers are supposedly locked inside the mansion, continuing their brutal, bloody feud in the dark. The Demelo House is an actively hostile environment. It is a place where the violent energy of the past physically manifests, ready to confront anyone who intrudes on the brothers' eternal war. Shortly after midnight, Samarth navigated his scooter down the dark, isolated roads. As the miles ticked by, the warm coastal air dropped to a freezing chill. The chirping of nocturnal insects faded out, leaving the jungles suffocatingly quiet. Then he saw it, the Demelo House. It was an old Portuguese-style mansion, rotting away in the gloom. Its hollow windows gave the immediate impression that the structure itself was watching him arrive. Looming over the roofline was the giant tree from the legends. Its roots pushed violently through the brickwork, and the thick trunk was covered in deep, jagged scratches, as if clawed by giant hands. Samarth pushed open the rusted iron gate. The moment his foot hit the grounds, a heavy pressure settled directly on his chest. Every breath required a conscious effort. Samarth's hands gripped the handle of the gate as his breath became shallow. The biting cold and the heavy silence made every step toward the house feel like moving through deep water. He stepped into the main hallway, instantly gagging. The thick, unmistakable stench of rotting meat hung in the stagnant air, completely surrounding him. Faded portraits lined the peeling walls. In the dim light, the painted faces looked warped and melted, their eyes replaced by solid black voids that seemed to track his every movement. Panic finally set in. Samarth pulled out his phone, determined to snap the proof he needed and escape immediately. He opened the front-facing camera. As the screen lit up his face, his heart stopped. Standing directly over his shoulders in the digital viewfinder were two tall, shadow-drenched men. Samarth whipped around. Nothing. The long, black corridor behind him was completely empty. Then the silence broke. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards. It was immediately followed by a piercing shriek, and then the deafening sounds of two men screaming and tearing into each other in the darkness. He looked back down at his screen to use the flashlight, but the device died instantly. His fully charged battery was entirely drained, plunging him into absolute, defenseless darkness. Samarth sprinted blindly toward the exit. He cleared the front door and made it to the shadow of the giant tree before his legs locked perfectly in place. He couldn't lift his feet. He looked down. The earth beneath him had opened into a sunken, muddy crater. Half buried in the soil was a heavily decayed human corpse. The flesh was rotting off the bone, but the bone structure, the jawline, the hair, it was unmistakable. Samarth was staring down at his own dead face. Behind him, heavy footsteps approached. Two men stepped out of the gloom. Their bodies were mutilated, covered in deep, bloody stab wounds, their necks snapped at impossible angles. The auditory illusion of their fight ceased. The brothers slowly twisted their heads forward. their glowing red eyes locked onto Samarth. Their mutual hatred was suddenly redirected entirely at him. The mud turned to liquid, pulling Samarth's legs and lower torso beneath the surface. As the brothers leaned over him, his vision flickered, and then failed, leaving him submerged in the cold, wet earth. Hours later, the morning sun finally broke over the horizon. Samarth's friends, panicked by his absence, arrived at the property to find him collapsed in the dirt near the old tree, his clothes caked in mud. They dragged him to safety. When he regained consciousness and choked out what he had seen, his friends shook their heads. They told him it was just a panic attack, a trick of the mind brought on by the cold and the dark. Samarth packed his bags and left Goa the exact same day. But as the car pulled away from the coast, he looked back at the Demelo House one last time. Standing perfectly still in the second-story window were the two bleeding brothers, watching him leave. His friends pulled his physical body out of the dirt, but they couldn't rescue his mind. Samarth survived the night,